6 nuns vanished from St. Loretto's Abbey on a winter night in 1922. Their chapel doors were locked from the inside, candles still burning on the altar, and a single phrase carved into the stone: Credere perire est. To believe is to perish. For decades, the church called it a tragedy. Locals called it a curse. When the truth finally surfaced a century later, the discovery stunned everyone, because one of the missing sisters had never left the abbey at all. If mysteries like this haunt you, subscribe and follow the investigation. The train rolled through the prairie darkness like a pulse that refused to die. Every few miles, its whistle echoed against the empty fields and came back thinner, lonelier, as though the land itself were whispering a response. Dr. Eliza Warren sat by the window of the last car, her notebook open but untouched. The headline she'd clipped from the university archive fluttered faintly under the fan. 6 sisters vanish from Loretto Abbey. Sheriff baffled, church silent. Date: February 9th, 1922. She'd read it 100 times, but the words refused to dull. Vanish, baffled, silent. The trifecta of every obsession she'd ever chased outside. Lightning flared in the distance, revealing the silhouette of a bell tower long since abandoned, a spine against the horizon. She was heading there now. 103 years later, Eliza had written 3 books on post-war disappearances within religious institutions, including one that began with her own grandfather's name in a missing chaplain's ledger. None of them had prepared her for this. Loretto wasn't simply another unsolved case. It was a burial, an erasure the church itself had sealed. The file she'd received from a retired archivist 2 weeks earlier still smelled of mold and candle soot. Inside had been a set of photos: 6 nuns in white habits, faces blurred by the exposure, and a typed note in fading ink: "Do not open the crypt, they are still singing." When she'd called the archivist to ask what he meant, the line had gone dead. 2 days later, his obituary appeared in the Waco Tribune. Now the prairie opened, and in the far distance, lightning illuminated the outline of St. Loretto's Abbey, or what was left of it. A blackened spire, half-collapsed walls, and a field overrun with reeds where a river had once run. The conductor slowed the train, glancing back. "Nobody gets off here, ma'am," he said. "I know." She smiled thinly. "That's why I'm getting off." The platform was barely more than a plank and a rusted sign, but when her boots hit the wood, a strange quiet settled over everything. No crickets, no wind, just the faint echo of bells. 6 notes, one for each of the lost sisters. Eliza paused, recording softly into her dictaphone. Field note, February 8th, 2025. Loretto Township, population 42. Site of St. Loretto's Abbey. Closed 1922 after the disappearance of 6 nuns. Objective: determine veracity of reported crypt beneath chapel. Her voice sounded smaller than she meant it to. A dirt road led from the tracks toward the dark outline of the abbey. The grass grew tall and pale in the moonlight, bending in the cold wind that smelled faintly of iron. Each step forward seemed to thicken the air. When she reached the gates, she found them chained, not by modern lock, but by ironwork fused by rust, like something meant never to open again. She aimed her flashlight through the bars. The courtyard beyond was littered with stones, but in the center stood the fountain, bone-white marble, dry for decades, and around its rim, words still legible beneath moss: Deus audit silentium, God hears silence. She whispered it aloud, and the wind shifted, carrying a faint chime from somewhere inside the ruins. Her light swept across the courtyard and caught movement. A shape, slight and robed, crossing the nave where no floor remained. When she blinked, it was gone. Probably an owl, she murmured to herself, but owls didn't wear veils. The gate groaned as she pushed. Rust flaked like ash. Inside, the abbey's nave was hollow. Ribs of stone arching toward a sky so black it seemed to swallow the stars. The floor was a carpet of dust and bird bones. Candlesticks leaned against broken pews. She raised her recorder again. Interior collapsed structural remains suggest Gothic revival architecture. Stone imported. Possible river flooding around the 1950s caused... Her voice trailed off at the far end of the chapel, beneath the collapsed altar. The light caught something carved into the marble base. The same Latin phrase from the report. Credere perire est. To believe is to perish. She crouched, tracing the letters. The grooves were deep, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Her fingertips came away dark, as if the stone had bled ink. Then she saw it. A second inscription beneath, half buried under debris. A date. 1922, February 11th. And beneath it, a single name. Sister Catherine. Eliza's breath caught. The official record had claimed all 6 nuns were presumed perished, names withheld by request of the diocese. Yet here was one signed into the stone like a confession. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. She turned off the light to save the battery, letting her eyes adjust. The air felt charged, damp, alive. From somewhere beneath the floor came a faint drip, slow, rhythmic, like water moving behind stone. She followed the sound toward the chancel, where a section of the tiles had collapsed into a pit. She crouched, directing her beam downward. A wooden staircase descended into darkness. The edges of the boards looked soaked, though it hadn't rained in days. Her hand trembled as she lifted the recorder. Unmarked stairwell discovered beneath altar. Possible access to crypt referenced in archival note. Something flickered below, not movement, but light. Faint and golden, as if a candle still burned somewhere far beneath. She hesitated only a moment, then began to descend. The first step groaned. The second gave slightly under her weight. The smell intensified. Wax, water, and something older, almost sweet. 10 steps down, the air grew colder. She could hear it now, clearer. 6 voices, low and harmonic, singing in Latin. She froze, flashlight trembling in her grip. The sound rose once more, then stopped, as if the singers had heard her too. Silence flooded the passage, and then, from the dark below, a woman's voice, soft, calm, unmistakably human, whispered, "You shouldn't have come, Doctor." Eliza's light flickered. The stair gave way, and everything went black. When Dr. Eliza Warren woke, the world was stone and silence. Her cheek pressed against cold marble, dust dry in her throat. For a moment she couldn't tell if the dim light above was morning or something else entirely. The air smelled of old wax and mildew. Somewhere behind her, water dripped in an endless rhythm. She pushed herself upright, head throbbing. The flashlight lay a few feet away, beam fractured but alive. Its cone of light revealed walls of carved limestone lined with alcoves. Each alcove held a niche, and in each niche, a candle burned. 6 in total. The flame swayed faintly, though there was no draft. She staggered to her feet. "Field note," she rasped, voice unsteady. Subterranean chamber beneath altar. 6 alcoves, 6 lit candles, no recent human disturbance visible. Her rational mind clung to procedure, documentation as survival. The stairs she'd fallen through ended in a splintered heap above, too far to climb. Someone, years ago, had built this space to stay hidden. The walls were etched with Latin prayers. Some words she recognized, others had been scratched over, rewritten. In the center of the floor lay a wooden confessional, a small box-like structure with slatted panels and a half-drawn curtain. The wood gleamed faintly, as though recently polished. She approached. The door creaked open with a sound like exhalation. Inside, the air was still and close. A single rosary hung from the lattice, beads dark with age. Eliza's fingers brushed the seat, and dust smeared across her hand. But beneath the dust, something newer. A faint stain, deep and reddish-brown. Blood. The other side of the confessional was sealed. No door, only the carved outline of one. A chill prickled up her arms. She lifted the recorder again. Evidence of possible human remains. Confessional sealed from inside, date and cause unknown. She took a photo. The flash illuminated the carving at the base of the confessional. SC 1922. Sister Catherine. Eliza's pulse quickened. The name from the altar stone above. She ran her hand along the paneling until she felt a slight hollow beneath one corner. Pressing, the wood shifted. A small drawer slid open, releasing a breath of cold air. Inside lay a folded paper, edges curled. Ink bled nearly to oblivion. She held it under the flashlight. Only a few words remained legible. He says silence is the truest form of devotion. When the 6th bell rings, we will be one with him. Her mouth went dry. 6 nuns, 6 candles, 6 bells, and 1 confessor. A sudden sound, footsteps on stone, slow, deliberate. She turned off the light and held her breath. The drip of water had stopped. So had the air. Then, softly, a whisper from the corridor beyond. "Is someone there?" It was a man's voice, rough, human. Not the one she'd heard before. She hesitated. "Yes," she called, throat tight. "I fell through the—" Her flashlight flickered. When it steadied, a figure stood at the end of the hall. A man in work clothes, dust-covered, holding a lantern. "Jesus," he muttered. "You shouldn't be down here, miss. It ain't safe." Relief flooded her limbs. You work here?" He shook his head slowly. "Used to. Groundskeeper, long time back. They call me Jonah." He stepped closer, eyes reflecting the candlelight. "How'd you get inside?" "I'm a historian," she said, "researching the 1922 disappearance." His face twitched. "That ain't research material, ma'am." "That's a grave." She studied him, the tremor in his hands, the exhaustion in his voice. He wasn't young, maybe late 60s, but his eyes looked older. "I read there was a crypt," she said carefully. "No one ever confirmed it." "Because it wasn't supposed to exist," Jonah murmured. "They bricked it up after the flood, said it was better not to remember." He turned toward the confessional, his expression tightening. "You found her room." Eliza frowned. "Her? Sister Catherine," he said. "The last one seen alive. They said she went to confession that night and never came back out. Next morning the booth was empty, and the door was sealed from within." He looked around the chamber as if expecting someone. "You shouldn't touch anything." "I already did." He winced. "Then you should pray." Eliza felt a pulse beneath her feet, faint but rhythmic, as if something below the stone still moved. "Jonah," she said quietly, "why did they seal the crypt?" He hesitated. "Because they heard singing, after the 6th bell, from under the floor." A drop of water hit her shoulder. She looked up. The ceiling above the confessional glistened, damp spreading across the stone like veins. Jonah backed away. "Starting again." "What is?" He turned, lantern swinging wildly. "You need to leave, miss, now." The candles flared, all 6 at once. Eliza shielded her eyes as the flames rose high, their light impossibly white. The air vibrated, a hum like distant chanting, growing louder until it filled the chamber. The confessional door rattled, once, twice, then burst open. A gust of cold air swept through, extinguishing every flame but one. Inside the booth, the seat was empty. Only the rosary remained. Swinging gently, as though someone had just let go, Eliza's voice trembled into the recorder. "Phenomenon observed. Temperature drop. Candle reaction unexplainable. Possible?" She stopped, because on the wall above the confessional, New words had appeared in dripping black. The last confession was not hers. For several seconds after the words bled onto the wall, neither Eliza nor Jonah spoke. The single remaining candle hissed and guttered, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. Eliza forced herself to breathe. The air tasted metallic, old. She crouched and ran her hand across the letters. The black substance smeared wetly across her fingers. Ink, or something pretending to be Jonah, stepped backward until his shoulders met the stone. "It's happening the same way," he whispered. "Every 50 years, near February. Always the 6th bell." "You've seen this before?" He nodded once. "When I was a boy. My father tended this place after the diocese shut it down. One night he heard the bells, came down here, and he changed, never spoke again. Sat on the porch for 30 years staring at nothing." Eliza studied him. "And you kept working here?" "Someone had to keep the weeds off the graves." The floor trembled slightly. A deep vibration running through the stone dust sifted from the ceiling. The faint drip returned, faster now. "Water?" she asked. Jonah raised the lantern. "River runs under this hill. When it floods, the ground swells. That's what cracked the altar the first time." Eliza angled her flashlight toward the far wall. A narrow passage opened there, half collapsed, leading deeper beneath the abbey. Damp air poured from it, cool and rhythmic, as though something below was breathing. She turned to Jonah. "I need to see where it leads." He shook his head violently. "No. You want to die down there?" "I want to know what happened to them." He hesitated, then handed her the lantern. "Take this. When you hear water running fast, turn back. That means the river's waking." She nodded once and slipped into the passage. The corridor narrowed quickly, walls pressing close enough to brush her shoulders. The air smelled of iron and rot. Somewhere ahead, she heard the low murmur of moving water and another sound layered beneath. A faint hum, like a choir just below hearing. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles. Old frescoes peeled from the stone, painted saints with eyeless faces, halos faded to gray. She kept the recorder close. Sub-crypt corridor extending approximately 20 meters. Signs of moisture infiltration and hand-carved imagery, consistent with early 20th century devotional art, unconfirmed auditory phenomena. Her own voice steadied her. After another few steps, the tunnel widened into a chamber carved directly into the bedrock. In the center lay a circular pool no larger than a baptismal font, its surface smooth as glass. Beneath the water she could see shapes, 6 of them. Pale and still, Eliza knelt. The lantern light rippled across the water, distorting the outlines until they seemed to move. She leaned closer. They weren't bodies, not anymore. Each was a marble effigy, worn but delicate, nuns carved in repose, their hands clasped, faces serene. Around the base of each statue, letters etched in Latin formed a ring. Eliza brushed away sediment from the nearest one. The words read, "Silentium est lux." Silence is light. She felt a sudden pressure in her ears, as though the air itself tightened. The water vibrated once, concentric ripples radiating outward, though nothing had touched it. Then a single bubble rose and burst. A smell of candle smoke drifted up from the pool. She turned sharply. Jonah stood in the mouth of the tunnel, face pale. "Don't touch the water," he warned. "I wasn't going to." He pointed toward the opposite wall. "Look there." Carved into the stone was a door-shaped recess, sealed with a slab of marble identical to the altar above. Upon it, the same inscription, "Credere perire est." Jonah swallowed. Behind that is the river. That's where they said it took them. The church flooded this deliberately? They tried to bury the current, couldn't. It just moved lower. Eliza approached the sealed door, tracing the edge where mortar met stone. There's airflow. It's not fully closed. Jonah's lantern flickered. The water in the pool began to tremble, tiny waves slapping the edges. The faint humming swelled. Distinct voices now. 6. Intertwined in wordless harmony, Eliza backed away. You hear that? He nodded slowly. Same hymn they sang before they vanished. The marble slab shuddered, dust spraying from its seams. Jonah dropped the lantern. It rolled, spilling flame across damp floor. We have to go. She reached for him, but the water surged upward as if something beneath had exhaled. The statues rocked within their sockets, stone fingers loosening. From below, light erupted, soft gold like candle fire magnified 100-fold. Eliza threw her arm over her eyes. When she lowered it, the water had gone still again. The pool now empty. The effigies gone. Only their impressions remained in the stone, as if they had sunk straight through. Jonah's voice was a rasp. They answered the call. Eliza's hands trembled as she clicked the recorder. Observed displacement of 6 marble effigies. Unexplained apparent luminescence emanating from subsurface. Possible. Her words faltered as she saw the lantern flame curl sideways, drawn toward the sealed door as though gravity had tilted. Something pressed from the other side. A slow bulge formed in the marble, the surface stretching without cracking. Jonah grabbed her arm. We're leaving. The hum became a chorus, the same 6 notes that had rung the night they disappeared. They ran, the corridor breathing around them, water following in sudden sheets along the floor. The sound of bells chased them upward. Faint, impossible, coming from beneath. When they reached the broken stairwell, Jonah boosted her toward the opening. She caught the rim and pulled herself through into the ruined nave. Rain hammered the roof. The air smelled of ozone and mud. Jonah climbed after her, coughing hard. Eliza turned back toward the altar. Beneath the debris, a thin trickle of water seeped upward through the cracks. Clear at first, then darkening to the color of rust. Outside, the church bell, silent for a century, tolled once. By the time the rain eased, the road back to town had turned to black mud. Jonah's old pickup waited beyond the gate, its headlights throwing thin silver columns through the storm. Eliza climbed in beside him, soaked to the bone. Neither spoke for several miles. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was low. Those carvings, you saw them move, didn't you? Jonah kept his eyes on the road. I saw the water rise where no water should. It wasn't just that, she pressed. The statues vanished. 6 of them. How does stone disappear? He shook his head slowly. You keep trying to measure it like a scientist. You can't measure faith gone wrong. The windshield wipers groaned back and forth. Each pass of the blades revealed the faint outline of the old bell tower, receding behind them, haloed by lightning. Eliza stared until it disappeared. Who kept the records after the diocese closed the abbey? There's a man in Waco, Jonah said. Name's Father Henley. He used to run the archive room before they locked it down. If anyone knows what happened, it's him. But he don't talk easy. She nodded slowly. Then we'll make him. Jonah gave a humorless laugh. Lady, if Henley's still alive, he's 100 years old. People like that don't get made to do anything. They reached Waco after midnight. The town slept under a thin fog, the streets empty except for the stray glow of neon from a 24-hour diner. Jonah parked beside a brick building with boarded windows and a faded sign, Diocesan Records. Closed to public. Eliza got out, flashlight ready. You're not coming? He leaned across the seat, eyes shadowed. You go ask your questions, but if you hear bells, you run. She didn't answer inside. The building smelled of dust and old paper. The front hall was lined with file cabinets, their labels flaking. 1920 to 1935, property disputes, clergy obituaries. A narrow staircase led upward toward a faint flicker of candlelight. Eliza climbed slowly, every step creaking. At the top sat an old man behind a desk stacked with yellowed folders. He was thin, almost translucent, skin the color of parchment. A single candle burned beside him, though an electric lamp sat unused. "You shouldn't be here," he said without looking up. Eliza hesitated. "Father Henley." His eyes lifted, pale gray, like glass left in sunlight too long. "You found Loretto." Her pulse quickened. "I'm a historian. I'm studying the 1922 disappearance. I need to know what the church found, or buried." He smiled faintly, emotion that barely reached his eyes. "The church doesn't bury things, Doctor. It sanctifies them. 6 women vanished. Their names were erased. Someone carved warnings into the walls." "Warnings?" She nodded. "Credere perire est. You know what it means." Henley closed a file with slow precision. "To believe is to perish. A heresy and a prophecy, depending on who you ask." He rose, moving to a locked cabinet. From it, he drew a flat wooden box bound with leather straps. "You think those sisters simply vanished, but you misunderstand what they believed." He set the box on the desk and opened it. Inside lay 6 photographs, black and white, edges curling, the nuns standing in the abbey courtyard. In each image, their faces had blurred almost completely, as though exposure itself had refused them. "This was taken a week before they disappeared," Henley said. "The photographers swore they were moving, even while standing still." Eliza studied the pictures. They believed they could ascend. They believed silence itself was divine, that through it, they could transcend the flesh. The abbess led them in a ritual, one forbidden since the 14th century, a psalm that shouldn't be spoken, 6 voices becoming one. He leaned closer. "You've heard it, haven't you?" Eliza froze. "Heard what?" "The hymn you were in the crypt." "How do you?" "I sealed it," he said quietly. "After the flood. They told me to keep it hidden, to call it an accident, but the river doesn't keep secrets, only delays them." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no storm lingered. The candle flame danced sideways. Eliza swallowed. "What did the church find below the altar?" Henley stared past her, as though seeing something far away. Not bodies, not ghosts. Something that learned to imitate prayer. When we broke the stones, the sound that came out was human. 6 voices, 1 breath. They begged for silence. He looked down at his trembling hands. "We gave it to them." Eliza felt cold climb her spine. "Then why are the bells ringing again?" Henley's eyes lifted, wet with fear. "Because someone opened the door." Her throat tightened. "The river." He nodded. "It's awake now. It's never stopped calling." The candle went out. For a moment, there was total darkness, and in it, a soft harmony, faint, feminine, rising from the floorboards. Henley whispered, "They always start with a hymn." Eliza backed toward the stairs. "Father, we have to leave." He didn't move. "Go, Doctor. I kept their names from the records, but their prayers are older than ink." When she reached the door, she looked back once Henley stood motionless, lips moving silently, eyes rolled upward as if listening to something inside his skull. The air shimmered around him, candlelight returning of its own accord, brighter, golden, the same impossible hue as the water beneath Loretto. She turned and fled into the rain. Outside, Jonah waited in the truck, engine idling. "You get what you came for?" Eliza slammed the door, shaking. "He said the river never stopped calling." Jonah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Then we don't have much time." Behind them, a sound carried faintly through the storm. 6 notes, struck like bells beneath the earth. The storm had drifted east by morning, leaving the sky washed and brittle, a color between pewter and bone. The road from Waco shimmered with puddles that caught the early light like mirrors. Eliza hadn't slept. She sat slumped in the passenger seat, the old photographs clutched in her lap. Each blurred face seemed to shift when she blinked. Jonah chewed the stem of an unlit cigarette, eyes on the horizon. "You're sure he said the river?" "He said it never stopped calling," she murmured, as if it were alive. Jonah spat out the cigarette and nodded toward the hill ahead, where the ruins of Loretto stood like ribs under fog. "Then maybe it's time we answer it." They parked near the fallen gate. The air smelled of wet limestone and old incense. From the slope below, the river glinted in the morning haze, wide, slow, deceptively calm. Eliza stepped out first. Her boots sank into the soaked earth. "The current's low enough to reach the lower crypt." Jonah tightened his coat. That's assuming there's still a crypt left. The path wound down through cypress trees, bent low by years of storms. Every few yards, pieces of marble jutted from the mud, fragments of the old abbey wall, half buried like bones. When they reached the riverbank, she stopped. The water moved in strange rhythms, a pulse almost, rings spreading outward from no visible source. "You see that?" she asked. Jonah squinted. "It's breathing the way something does right before it wakes up." They watched as a small bubble rose, burst, and left behind a faint shimmer, gold as candlelight. Eliza whispered, "The same light in the photographs." "Let's make this quick," Jonah said, "before whatever's breathing decides to wake up." They followed the bank until they reached the remnants of the chapel foundation. The river had eaten half of it, leaving only a fractured archway. Beneath the arch yawned a dark cavity, the lower crypt, sealed decades before Eliza knelt beside it. The air that seeped out was colder than the morning. Jonah handed her a flashlight. "Ladies first." "Brave of you," she said, but her voice trembled. Inside, the passage sloped downward, slick with algae. The beam cut through mist and dust, catching the glint of something metallic on the wall. Latin script carved deep, lux per silentium, light through silence. Her throat tightened. This wasn't in any record. Maybe that's the point. They moved deeper. The tunnel opened into a chamber supported by cracked pillars. Rainwater dripped through the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats that echoed like a heartbeat. At the center stood a stone altar half submerged in water. Around it, 6 shallow depressions marred the floor. Graves, perhaps, or places for kneeling. Eliza's light caught movement in the pool beside the altar, a pale shape beneath the surface. Cloth. She crouched, heart hammering, and reached in. The water was icy. Her fingers brushed fabric. Linen. Rough, folded over something solid. She pulled. A small wooden rosary surfaced, its beads darkened with age. The crucifix had been replaced by a triangle, etched with a hollow circle. Jonah cursed softly. "That ain't scripture." Eliza turned it in her hand. "I've seen this before. In one of the banned Vatican manuscripts, Ordo Vacui, the Order of Emptiness." Jonah's gaze flicked toward the tunnel. "Sounds about right." She set the rosary on the altar and scanned the wall behind it. More carvings, half hidden under grime. 6 names faintly visible. Sister Eleanor, Sister Ruth, Sister Mercy, Sister Claire, Sister Agnes, Sister Madeline. Eliza whispered each one aloud. The chamber responded. The dripping stopped. The air thickened, pressure building like the moment before thunder. The river outside seemed to hush. "Eliza," Jonah said slowly, "I think you should stop saying their names." But she couldn't. Something in her voice no longer felt entirely hers. "Sister Madeline," she finished. A soft sound rose from the pool. Not water, but breath. Then a whisper, overlapping voices forming one low note that trembled the walls. Jonah grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." The light flickered. A handprint bloomed on the altar stone, Wet, translucent, then gone. Eliza stumbled backward. "They're not gone, Jonah. They're trapped." "Trapped or waitin'. Either way, we don't want to find out which." They ran for the tunnel, the echo of the single tone following them like a siren. Outside, the sun had turned white, bleaching the sky. The river looked still again, but when Jonah touched the surface with his boot, it recoiled, just slightly, as if the water itself had flinched. He crossed himself unconsciously. Father Henley was right. "You woke something." Eliza stared at the rosary still clutched in her hand. They wanted silence. Maybe we gave them the opposite. Jonah started the truck without a word. That evening, they checked into a roadside motel 20 miles north. The room smelled of damp carpet and stale coffee. Eliza spread the photographs and the rosary across the table. 6 names, she said, but only 5 graves were ever reported sealed. Who was missing? Jonah rubbed his eyes. Maybe the one who started it. She stared at the last photo, the abbess, a tall woman whose face had vanished into blur. Only her hands remained visible, outstretched as if conducting a choir. "Abbess Helena du Marais," Eliza murmured. "Transferred from France in 1918, excommunicated in absentia, 1923. Jonah frowned. "You memorized that?" "It's the only name that disappeared from Vatican records the same year as the others. She's the 7th voice." He leaned back, uneasy. "You said there were 6. "There were," she said quietly, "until someone replaced the crucifix with a symbol of emptiness." The lamp on the table flickered once. Then again. Jonah muttered, "We're not staying here tonight." But Eliza didn't answer. She was listening. From somewhere inside the walls, faint and distant, came the sound of running water. Steady, deliberate, like a river coursing behind plaster. Jonah stood, hand near the door handle. "Tell me that's the plumbing." Eliza's gaze never left the rosary. If it is, it's praying. By dawn, the motel felt colder than the air outside. The radiator hissed but gave off no warmth. Eliza sat at the table again, tracing the rosary's triangle symbol on a notepad. Sleep had not come. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw the river's surface rippling with that impossible gold. Jonah returned from the lobby with 2 coffees and a newspaper. "Nothing in print about last night," he said, dropping it onto the table. "No flooding, no bells." "That doesn't mean it didn't happen." He sat across from her, watching as she arranged the photographs into a circle. "You ever think maybe you're not meant to find the answers?" She met his gaze. "I don't believe in forbidden knowledge, only hidden evidence." Jonah rubbed his temples. "That's the same thing the abbess believed, far as I heard." Eliza turned one photograph toward him. Abbess Helena du Marais. She wasn't just their leader, she was their experiment. 6 nuns followed her into silence, but she was the 7th. The one who conducted the hymn. Jonah looked uneasy. "You're saying she's still down there?" "I'm saying she never left." The wind rattled the window. Somewhere outside, a train passed, its whistle long and mournful. Eliza picked up her recorder. Field note, February 9th. Found evidence of 7th participant in 1922 disappearance. The abbess may have remained in contact with surviving clergy after the event. Possible link to Order of Emptiness. Investigating. Jonah sighed. "You really think talking into that thing keeps you safe?" "It keeps me sane." He studied her for a long moment, then said, "There's one more person you should talk to, Sister Marianne. She lives out by the state line. Last novice from Loretto, who wasn't in the chapel that night. She's near 90 now." Eliza straightened. "She's alive?" "Barely. Folks say she doesn't speak much, but maybe she'll talk to you." They drove for hours through flat country, the sky whitening into glare. By noon, they reached a cluster of clapboard houses ringed with wild sage. The convent was little more than a farmhouse painted gray. A young caretaker met them at the door. "Sister Marianne doesn't get visitors." I'm here on her history, Eliza said. I won't stay long. After a moment, the caretaker relented and led them down a narrow hall to a room heavy with incense. Sister Marianne sat in a rocking chair by the window, a blanket over her knees. Her skin was parchment thin, her eyes filmed with cataracts, but her gaze was sharp. I know why you've come, she said before Eliza spoke. Her voice carried the dry rustle of old pages. Eliza knelt beside her. You were there, weren't you? The night they disappeared. Marianne's lips trembled. I was in the infirmary. Fever kept me from joining them. The bells woke me. 6 rings, then nothing. Eliza hesitated. Did you ever see Abbess Helena again? The nun's hands clenched around her rosary. She told us silence would be salvation, that words were a prison. We believed her until we saw what silence asked in return. Jonah shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. And what was that? Marianne looked up, eyes clouded with tears. It wanted to be heard. Eliza felt her skin crawl. The hymn? Marianne nodded. It wasn't sung, it was answered. She made them stand in a circle, feet in the river water, mouths open. The sound that came wasn't theirs. It came through them, and when it ended, there were only 6. The room seemed to tilt. Marianne gripped Eliza's wrist suddenly, strength surprising. Do not call her name, she whispered. Do not listen when she answers. The 7th voice is never hers. It's what she opened. The old woman's breathing quickened, then stilled. Her eyes rolled back, lips moving silently. Jonah crossed himself. She's praying. Eliza shook her gently. Sister Marianne, can you hear me? A faint hiss escaped the nun's throat. Not breath. Whisper. Words forming without sound. Eliza leaned closer and caught a single syllable. Amnion. Then the rocking chair went still. Eliza's pulse roared in her ears. She's gone. Jonah looked toward the window. We should go too. But Eliza wasn't ready. She scribbled the word amnion in her notebook, underlining it twice. It's Greek, means sacred vessel, or womb. She called the river a womb. Jonah muttered, You really think that's what's waiting under there? She closed the notebook. Something was born that night. And it's still hungry. They left the convent in silence. By dusk, they were back on the road to Loretto. The sun bled out behind the horizon, staining the fields red. Jonah drove slower than usual. If we go back, we might not come out again. I know, Eliza said softly, but if we don't, no one will ever close it. The first star appeared over the black outline of the abbey ruins. The river shimmered faintly, though there was no moon. As they approached, the truck's headlights flickered. The radio, dead since morning, crackled once. 6 tones, bell-like, perfectly even. Eliza turned it off, heart pounding. Jonah exhaled. Guess that's our invitation. When they stepped out, the night air was thick and warm, the smell of rain gone sour. The river glowed faintly with that same golden hue, pulsing every few seconds like the beat of a buried heart. Eliza whispered, Do you hear that? Jonah nodded. 7 voices now. The night around the abbey pulsed with a rhythm that was not quite wind, not quite river. The air itself seemed to breathe. Eliza stood on the bank with the rosary coiled around her wrist, the triangle and circle symbol pressed against her skin. Jonah's flashlight cut a weak cone through the fog. It's moving faster, he said. The river's surface no longer looked calm. It folded and flexed like muscle. Eliza crouched at the edge. Beneath the water, the current spiraled inward, a whirlpool that never widened. It's not draining, she whispered. It's feeding itself. Jonah's voice was barely audible. That word she said, amnion. What's it mean again? A membrane, the thing that holds life before birth. She glanced at him. Maybe this river isn't a grave. Maybe it's a womb. Lightning flashed, white and sharp. For an instant, she saw the ruins reflected perfectly on the water's surface, but upside down, inverted, as if another abbey stood beneath, its windows glowing faint gold. Then the sound began. A low hum first, then 6 clear tones, bell pure, joining one after another until the 7th broke through. Higher, fragile, human. The earth underfoot vibrated. Jonah grabbed her shoulder. "We should go, now!" She didn't move. The sound drew her forward, gentle and absolute. Each step into the shallows felt like surrender. The cold clamped her legs, but the pull below was stronger than fear. "Eliza!" She turned, eyes wide. "Listen." The river answered her. Bubbles rose around her knees, forming words in the churned reflection. Amnion. Then the surface split. Something emerged. A shape neither flesh nor stone, a shimmer of water suspended in air. Within it, 6 faint outlines shifted like figures trapped behind glass. Faces half-formed, lips moving in silent prayer. Jonah stumbled backward, cross in hand. "Lord, have mercy." The thing pulsed once. A whisper slid through the air, 6 voices overlapping. "She waits." Eliza stepped closer despite herself. "Abbess Helena?" The river brightened, gold surging upward. For an instant the shape resolved into a woman's form, veiled, luminous, her mouth opening as if to speak. But the 7th voice answered instead. It came from everywhere at once, an inhuman chord that hollowed the night. The whirlpool exploded outward, drenching them both. The apparition collapsed back into the current, leaving only the echo of that cry reverberating through the ground. Jonah dragged her to the bank, coughing. "That ain't no abbess. That's the thing she birthed." Eliza wiped mud from her face, trembling. "Then it's still being born." The glow that had filled the water did not vanish. It bled outward, veins of light threading through the riverbed, running toward the ruins. The abbey stones answered with a faint hum, mortar seams glowing as though fire traveled beneath them. Jonah hauled himself upright. "We have to seal it. Pour concrete, dynamite, anything." Eliza shook her head slowly. "You can't bury a birth." She stumbled toward the chapel, following the path of gold inside. The nave was flooded ankle deep. The reflections on the water showed not her face, but the 6 nuns, translucent and patient. Each step echoed twice, once in her world. Once in theirs at the altar, she found the carved slab cracked down the center, as if split from below. Steam rose from the fissure, carrying the smell of myrrh and rot. The words, "Credere perir est," glowed faintly, molten in the dark. Jonah appeared behind her, soaked and shivering. "Eliza, it's coming through, listen." A wet, rhythmic sound, like breath drawn through stone. From beneath the floor came the pulse of something enormous and near. She lifted the recorder with shaking hands. Field note: the phenomenon is active. The abbey is resonating with the river's frequency. The air pressure. The recorder died with a hiss. Then the bells rang again, not from the tower but from below, their notes sliding together into a single long tone. The fissure widened. A rush of water burst upward, carrying fragments of marble and bone. Out of it rose a shape, human at first glance, then too tall, too fluid, its edges dissolving in vapor. Eliza could not move. The thing regarded her with the suggestion of a face, 6 features blending and separating when it spoke, every voice she had heard. The sisters, the abbess, even Father Henley, folded into one. Silence is not absence. It is what remains when faith forgets itself. Jonah fired the lantern's kerosene at it. The flames struck the water and vanished instantly. The creature extended a hand of light toward Eliza. Around its wrist glimmered the same triangle symbol as the rosary. For a heartbeat she felt weightless, as if the world had paused its rotation. The words formed unbidden in her mind. Amnion accepts what remembers. She tore the rosary from her wrist and hurled it into the fissure. The river's glow flared blindingly bright, then collapsed. The air imploded. When vision returned, the water was gone. The floor lay cracked but dry. The golden veins had faded to ash. Only the faint outline of 7 footprints remained burned into the stone. Jonah's voice came small and hoarse. "Is it over?" Eliza stared at the prints. The smallest one, 7th, was still wet. She whispered, "It's learning to walk." The morning after the floodlight faded, Loretto stood quiet under a gauze of mist. The smell of smoke and river silt clung to everything. Eliza woke in the nave where she and Jonah had collapsed, the cracked altar a few yards away. Her head throbbed. The recorder lay beside her, miraculously dry, its red light blinking as if it had never lost power. When she played it back, there was no voice, no water, no bells, only the faint rhythm of a heartbeat that was not her own. Jonah crouched near the doorway, staring at the floor. "You'd better come see this." Across the nave, 7 dark prints led from the fissure toward the open doors. Each was bare, delicate, perfectly defined. The 7th was smallest, the toes tapered like a child's. "They weren't there last night," Jonah said. Eliza knelt, tracing one with her fingertip. The stone was cold, but beneath the surface she felt a vibration, subtle, persistent. "They're still warm," she whispered. Jonah spat into the dust, unease settling in his shoulders. "Whatever you threw into that pit didn't stop it. You just gave it legs." Eliza looked toward the gate. The prints vanished into the fog beyond. "Then we follow." The trail led down the slope to the river road, where mud and gravel bore the same impressions. Each print gleamed faintly, as if lit from within. They walked in silence. The world seemed emptied of sound. Even the birds had vanished. After half a mile, the tracks turned off the road and entered the ruins of an old cemetery. The headstones leaned like tired sentinels. At the far end, beneath a yew tree, stood an open grave inside, water pooled at the bottom, reflecting the sky. Jonah's face tightened. "That wasn't open yesterday." Eliza crouched at the edge. The headstone read, "Sister Catherine." Credere perire est, her stomach twisted. She was the first. A single footprint pressed into the earth below the inscription, pointing downward into the grave. Jonah's breath came rough. "I'm done, Doc. I've seen enough holy nightmares for one lifetime." Eliza didn't answer. Something shimmered beneath the water in the pit, golden, faint, a pulse of light. Like before, without thinking, she lowered her hand toward it. The water rippled outward, and the reflection staring back at her was not her own. The face was veiled, serene, eyes closed. Then they opened. She jerked back, stumbling into Jonah's arms. "She's awake." They retreated to the truck, silence thick between them. Jonah drove fast, gravel spitting under the tires. "Where are we going?" Eliza stared out the window, knuckles white around her recorder. "Back to Waco. Father Henley kept those archives for a reason. There has to be something about what she became." Jonah muttered, "If he's still breathing after what we saw, I'll eat that newspaper." But when they reached the records building, the front door hung open. Inside smelled of damp and candle wax, papers scattered across the floor like shed feathers. In the back room, Henley's chair was overturned. The candle burned to nothing. On the desk, written in thick black strokes, a single line, "She walks where the water cannot." Eliza swallowed hard. She's not bound to the river anymore. Jonah found the wooden archive box half smashed against the wall. Inside, soaked but intact, lay a parchment fragment in Latin. He handed it to her. "You read this stuff. What's it say?" She translated softly, "The amnion seeks vessel anew. Flesh remembers what stone forgets." Her gaze drifted to her hands, mud-stained, trembling. The skin around her wrist where the rosary had pressed was darkened, faintly glowing in the shape of the triangle. Jonah saw it too. "What the hell?" "It marked me," she whispered. "When I threw it back," he stepped away. "Then maybe you're the new vessel." She turned sharply. "Don't." But he was already backing toward the door. "You said it yourself, something was born. Maybe it chose its mother." The sound of bells rolled faintly through the distance. 7 now, not 6. Eliza's breath came fast. "Jonah, we can still stop it. We just need to understand what the amnion wants." He shook his head. "I don't think it wants. I think it remembers. And that's worse." Lightning flickered through the windows, though no storm brewed outside. The faint heartbeat from her recorder grew louder. She turned it off, but the sound continued, deep and resonant, emanating from beneath her ribs. Jonah stared. "That ain't coming from the device, Doc." Eliza pressed a hand to her chest. "It's inside." They left the archive at dusk. The sky glowed an unhealthy amber, as if sunset had frozen. Eliza could feel the rhythm beneath her skin syncing with the hum in the ground. When they reached the outskirts of town, Jonah pulled over. "You're not going back to Loretto. You'll drown in it." Eliza looked at the horizon where the Abbey spire pierced the haze. "Maybe that's the point." She opened the door and stepped out, her shadow stretching long across the empty field. The 7th bell tolled once more. Jonah called after her. "Eliza!" She turned only once, eyes shining with that same golden reflection. "If I don't return, seal it, no matter what you hear." Then she walked toward the ruins, following the trail of faintly glowing footprints that had begun again in the dirt. The road back to Loretto was washed in an amber haze that never fully darkened, as if dusk had chosen not to end. Eliza walked alone, recorder silent, coat clinging damply to her shoulders. Every few minutes she felt the pulse beneath her skin, that slow synchrony with the unseen current. She told herself it was adrenaline. She didn't believe it. By the time the Abbey came into view, the fog had thickened into gold-veined mist. The bell tower leaned like a broken metronome, and from the fissure where the altar had split came a faint glow, rhythmic, breathing. Eliza descended into the nave. Water pooled ankle-deep again, though it hadn't rained in days. Each step stirred reflections that weren't hers, faces flickering beneath the surface. "Field note," she whispered, voice steadier than her heartbeat. "Reactivation of phenomenon. Possible correlation with personal physiological resonance. Investigating." She knelt at the cracked altar. The footprints she'd seen that morning had filled with water, now gleaming gold. When she touched one, warmth spread through her palm. A voice behind her said, "You shouldn't have come back." "Jonah." He stepped through the doorway, hair wet, shotgun slung over one shoulder. His eyes looked hollow, as if the last 24 hours had stolen years. "You followed me," she said. "Didn't have a choice. Roads are closed, rivers risen on its own." He pointed to her wrist. "That mark's brighter." The triangle shimmered faintly through her skin, pulsing in time with the heartbeat beneath. "It wants to be found," she said. Jonah glanced toward the altar. "Or it wants out." He handed her a small tin flask. "Holy water. Brought it from St. Jerome's. Don't ask how old it is." She smiled faintly. "You're not the praying type?" "Never hurts to cover the spread." They stood in silence, listening. The hum beneath the floor had changed pitch. Faster now, like something struggling to breathe. Jonah chambered around. "You got a plan?" Eliza's gaze moved to the altar fissure. "Find the source and the connection." "Meaning what? Blow the place up?" "Meaning seal the amnion." He shook his head. "And if it's already inside you?" She didn't answer. They descended the fractured steps behind the altar, lantern light trembling. The crypt smelled of river and rust. The pool where the statues had once rested was gone, replaced by a pit of dark silt. At its center, the broken rosary she had thrown back lay half buried, the triangle charm glowing faintly like an ember refusing to die. Eliza knelt. Reaching toward it, Jonah caught her wrist. "You touch that, we're done." "I have to. It's tethered to me." She touched it anyway. The instant her fingers brushed the charm, light surged up her arm, and the crypt walls rippled outward as if the stone had turned to liquid. Jonah cursed, pulling her back. "What did you do?" The light gathered around her hand, spiraling until it formed a faint outline of a circle hovering just above her palm. Within it, a heartbeat flickered. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "It's alive!" The ground shook. From the pit came the sound of rushing water, then a voice, echoing in both of their heads. "Vessel found." Jonah fired into the pit. The blast echoed uselessly. The sound was swallowed whole. Water exploded upward, slamming him against the wall. Eliza screamed his name but couldn't reach him. The glow enveloped her completely, the river's voice flooding her thoughts. She saw flashes. The 6 nuns standing in the circle, the abbess raising her hands, light breaking through their bodies like stained glass. Then the 7th figure, Helena herself, stepping into the river, whispering a single phrase, "Amnion requiret memoriam." The amnion seeks memory. Eliza gasped. The light dimmed. She found herself kneeling at the edge of the pit, Jonah beside her, soaked but breathing. He coughed hard. "That thing's talking through you." "She made it from memory," Eliza said. "It feeds on what people forget. The church tried to erase them, and that's how it lived." Jonah shook his head. "Then stop remembering." "I can't. It's using me as its record." The water stilled, suddenly calm. A whisper brushed her ear, intimate and cold. "Then you will keep us forever." She clutched her head, crying out. The golden veins crawled up her neck, tracing her skin like roots. Jonah grabbed her shoulders. "Fight it!" She looked at him, eyes now flecked with gold. "You can't fight a memory." For a moment, everything froze. The hum stopped. Then, with a sound like glass breaking underwater, the pit collapsed inward. The shock wave knocked them both backward. Dust filled the crypt. The glow snuffed out. Jonah coughed, eyes watering. "Eliza!" She lay still, chest rising shallowly. The triangle mark had vanished. He shook her. "Doc!" Her eyes opened slowly, normal again, blue and clear. "It's quiet." Jonah exhaled hard, helping her sit. "Please tell me that means it's over." She looked down at her hands. "It's asleep." Jonah stood, wary. "Then we bury this place and never come back." But as they climbed toward the surface, Eliza felt it. The faint pulse deep within her chest, patient, waiting. At the top of the stairs, dawn filtered through the nave's shattered roof. The river outside gleamed a dull gray. No light, no hum. Jonah turned once more toward the altar. "Guess we won." Eliza didn't reply. She stared at the horizon where the river met the fields, and whispered so softly he couldn't hear. "Or it's just begun again." For 3 days, the river slept. No bells, no glow, no sound but wind moving through the reeds. Loretto looked almost ordinary again, stones drying in the sun, birds returning hesitantly to the tower. Eliza stayed near the ruins, writing what she could remember. Each page began clear, but by nightfall the ink bled into gray blotches, words losing shape. Every morning she found fewer notes than she'd written. Jonah spent those days boarding the church windows and spreading lime through the nave. "If it wakes again," he said, "I want something between us and it." Eliza nodded but kept her silence. Her heart still pulsed with a faint second rhythm. On the 3rd night, fog rolled back in from the river. The air carried the smell of incense and rain. Eliza stood outside the gate, notebook under her arm, and watched the mist curl around the stones like smoke. Jonah joined her, lantern swinging. "Weather says clear skies. Guess we don't rate weather reports out here." She smiled weakly. Maybe the amnion writes its own forecast. Don't joke, he said. Feels wrong even breathing its name. She turned toward the river. Names give form. Silence erases it. That's what the abbess wanted. Silence that could cleanse faith itself. Jonah stared at her. You still sound like her. Eliza looked away. Maybe I understand her now. At midnight, the first bell rang. It wasn't loud. More like a vibration through the ground. Dust shook from the rafters. Jonah's head snapped up. No, not again. Eliza's eyes glowed faintly gold in the lantern light. It's calling. Jonah grabbed her arm. No, Doc, you listen to me. You sealed it. You ain't answering no more calls. But she was already walking toward the altar. If I don't, someone else will. The second bell rang. Then the third water began seeping through the cracks, curling around her boots. She knelt and pressed her palms flat to the stone. The mark on her wrist shimmered back to life, faint light seeping through her skin. Eliza, Jonah pleaded. Please, she whispered. I can still contain it. Contain what? The silence. The fourth bell struck, deeper this time, resonating in her bones. The fissure beneath the altar widened an inch. Warm air rose through it. Breath from something vast. Eliza closed her eyes. It's memory. It doesn't know the world moved on. She began to hum the same six-note hymn from the recorder, her voice steady, gentle. The water stilled, responding like a mirror. Jonah backed toward the doors, shotgun useless at his side. You sing that, it'll take you too. Her voice grew stronger. With each note, the golden veins faded from her skin, retreating toward the mark on her wrist. The fifth bell echoed, shaking dust loose from the rafters. Then the sixth. The air around her shimmered, heat, light, and something older than both. The fissure closed a fraction. Jonah dared a step forward. Doc, whatever you're doing, it's working. She didn't hear him. The seventh bell sounded, faint and distant, almost human. Everything stopped. The water vanished between heartbeats, absorbed into the stone. The hum ceased. Eliza remained kneeling, eyes closed, breathing slow. Jonah approached carefully. Eliza? She opened her eyes. They were clear again, only tired. It's over. He laughed once, hollow. You sure? She looked at her hands, ordinary, unmarked. Yes, it's gone. Outside, the sky began to lighten. Birds returned to the tower, their cries thin but real. Jonah leaned against the pew, shaking his head. I swear, if I ever see another church, I'm turning around. Eliza smiled faintly. You did well. You mean we ain't dead? I'll take it. They left the nave together, dawn washing color back into the world. They reached the truck. As Jonah started the engine, Eliza turned once more toward the river. Its surface was still, pale as glass. For the first time in days, she couldn't feel the second heartbeat. The silence in her chest was complete. Jonah glanced at her. Where to now? Back to the university, she said. I have to write the record. He frowned. You really think anyone will read it? They have to. By evening, they reached Waco. The diocese building stood quiet, boards nailed over the windows. Eliza unlocked the side door with a key she'd borrowed from Henley's ring. Inside, the air was stale but peaceful. She sat at the old desk, notebook open, pen steady. February 15th, 2025. The Loretto phenomenon concluded. Sight dormant, cause unknown. Her handwriting was firm, detached, scientific. Yet beneath the words, she heard a faint echo, like ink whispering as it dried. She closed the book, slid it into the drawer, and locked it. Jonah lingered by the doorway. So that's it? That's it, she said. Let it rest. They stepped outside. The night was quiet. Only the faintest ripple moved across the puddles by the curb, forming circles that met and vanished. Jonah didn't notice he was looking at the sky. Clear for once. Eliza smiled. Yes, clear. She turned away before he could see the tiny bead of water forming at the base of her wrist, glowing gold for a heartbeat before sinking back beneath the skin. The silence followed her all the way home. The spring rains came early that year. By March, the Brazos had swollen past its banks, turning the valley below Waco into a sheet of dull silver. From Eliza's office window, it looked almost peaceful. She hadn't spoken to Jonah in 3 weeks. The church at Loretto was officially condemned. The diocese filed it under natural collapse. A convenient phrase for what no one could explain. Eliza tried to return to normal work, lectures, student papers, the quiet hum of the archive. But ordinary life sounded thinner now. Every silence reminded her of the one beneath the chapel. One morning, as she unlocked her office, she found a package waiting. No return address. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, lay a photograph. 6 women in habits standing in front of a whitewashed wall. The same faces from the convent's century-old files, except now the image was clear, not brittle or faded. On the back, one word in pencil: returned. Her hands went cold. She scanned the photo under light, checked the paper stock. Modern. Someone had reprinted it, but from where? The diocese denied sending it. The archivist hadn't seen anything like it. That night she dreamed of water again, this time still, glassy, reflecting 6 veiled figures walking across its surface. Their shadows stretched downward, long and wrong, like cracks opening in the deep. By April, her nightmares turned to sounds. First, a low hum behind the library walls, then the echo of bells she couldn't locate. Students noticed her fatigue, but no one asked directly. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, she played her old field recordings. The file from Loretto, the final hymn she'd sung to seal the fissure, now contained new sound. Between the notes came a whisper, layered and wet. "Remember us." She shut the laptop. For a long time she sat in the dark, hearing nothing but her own breath. Then she picked up her keys and drove west. Fog clung to the highway, blurring the signs. By the time she reached the old turnoff, dawn had begun to burn through the mist. The church ruins were half buried under new growth, the altar stones scattered like vertebrae. Jonah's truck was already parked near the fence. He was sitting on the hood, coffee in hand, face drawn. "Knew you'd come," he said. "You too." He nodded toward the river. "Can't sleep, keeps talking." They walked to the bank together. The current was high but calm, the surface opaque. Eliza crouched near the edge and touched the water. Cold, alive. "You feel that?" Jonah asked quietly. "Yes." "Same thing under the church?" She nodded. "It's moving again." "Then we stop it before it starts." "How?" He hesitated, then opened the glove box of his truck and pulled out a folder. "Found this when the county started surveying the land for flood control. Old blueprints. There's tunnels under the convent. Didn't just stop at the crypt, they run to the river." Eliza studied the yellowed pages. "Drainage tunnels." "Or channels," Jonah said. "They meet right under where you sang that song." A drop of rain hit the paper, spreading slowly. She looked up. The sky was perfectly clear. They followed the old service road to the base of the hill. Brush had overgrown the path, but the outline of a culvert was still visible. Stone mouth, half choked with mud, Jonah pried loose a metal grate. Inside, the air was cool and sweet with moss. Their flashlights carved narrow cones through the dark, catching bones of old pipes, bits of rosary chain. "Eliza," Jonah whispered. She turned her beam. The wall ahead shimmered faintly, as if wet. Symbols emerged under the light, Latin words carved shallowly into limestone: memoria fluit, sicut, sanguis. "Memory flows like blood," she translated. Jonah frowned. Why carve that in a drain? Because it wasn't one. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a small chamber half filled with water. In its center rose a pedestal of stone, and upon it, a wooden box. Eliza's breath caught. It was the same design as the confessor's box, smaller, newer. Jonah cursed softly. "Tell me that's not another one." She waded forward, ignoring the chill. The box was sealed with black wax. No symbol, just a single Roman numeral. 66, she murmured. Jonah stayed back. 6 nuns. Eliza nodded. 6 veils. She pressed her fingers to the wax. It was soft, as if recently melted. "Eliza, don't." But the seal gave before he could stop her. The lid lifted. Inside lay 6 rosary beads, identical to the ones she'd released months ago. Except these glowed faintly from within. Pulsing in rhythm, the water stirred. Ripples spread outward from the pedestal, touching the walls. The carved words brightened. Veins of light running through the stone. Jonah grabbed her arm. "We gotta go." She couldn't move. Her reflection in the water began to shift, splitting, multiplying, until 6 faces stared back at her. One whispered, "He remembers." The air thickened, smelling of incense and rot. Jonah pulled harder, dragging her toward the tunnel mouth. Behind them, the box began to hum. They stumbled into daylight, coughing. The grate fell shut behind them with a metallic scream. Eliza collapsed against the grass, trembling. "It's not done." Jonah wiped mud from his hands. "I don't care, we're done." But as they drove away, the river surface moved against the current, slow and deliberate, like something beneath was breathing again. That night, Eliza recorded everything while it was still fresh. The chamber, the carvings, the box. When she played the audio back, the hum followed, steady, rhythmic, and beneath it, the faint sound of 6 voices counting. She shut the recorder off. In the silence that followed, she thought she heard a single drop of water fall. But when she looked around the room, everything was dry. She didn't sleep. Outside her window, far in the distance, a bell tolled once, low and wrong, echoing through the night. Morning broke without color. The valley around Loretto lay drowned in fog, thick enough to taste. Jonah's truck idled on the ridge, headlights useless, beams swallowed by mist. Eliza sat beside him, recorder balanced on her knee. "The water's still rising," she said. Jonah squinted toward where the river should be. "It's more than that. It's changing course." He was right. Beneath the fog came a deep, steady roar. The Brazos was shifting its bed, chewing through the meadow where the abbey's foundation lay. Eliza stepped out, boots sinking into the mud. The air pulsed faintly, rhythmic as a heartbeat. "It's opening another way." Jonah followed, coat collar up, voice low. "You sure we should be this close?" She didn't answer. She walked until the ground fell away before her, a new chasm carved overnight. At its center, water spiraled downward, glittering with gold. "It's heading for the tunnels," she whispered. Jonah stared. "The ones we found yesterday?" "Yes, it's following memory." He frowned. "You keep saying that like it's got a mind." Eliza turned to him. "Not mind. Memory is older. It doesn't think, it repeats." The wind picked up. From deep inside the whirlpool came a sound. 6 notes, then the 7th, stretched into something like a sigh. Jonah crossed himself. "That's the hymn." Eliza gripped the recorder. "It's remembering its song." They descended the slope carefully, mud sliding beneath their feet. At the edge of the chasm, an old iron pipe jutted from the bank, one of the drainage tunnels. The water within glowed faintly. Eliza crouched, holding the recorder to the opening. "There's movement." Jonah leaned close. "That's breath." The next moment the river exhaled. A column of air shot from the pipe, knocking them backward. Voices spilled out with it. Dozens, layered, rising to a single word. "Amnion." Eliza pressed her hand to her wrist. The faint mark flared golden beneath her skin. "It's calling me," she said. "Then don't answer." But she was already standing. If it reaches the main channel, it'll spread. Every tributary carries memory. Every silence becomes a door. Jonah grabbed her arm. "Doc, listen to yourself. That's not science. That's faith," she said softly. "The same kind that drowned them." She slipped from his grasp and stepped into the shallow runoff. The cold cut through her like glass, but she kept moving until she reached the center of the spiral. "Eliza!" The current surged. Her voice rose over the roar. Field note, final observation. The amneon manifests as collective remembrance-seeking vessel, attempting closure through physical offering. "Closure through what?" Jonah shouted, but she was already sinking to her knees, hands pressed into the swirling water. The glow around her spread outward, turning the river surface into liquid light. Beneath her palms, she felt it, movement like muscle, the pulse of something immense and alive. "Take it back," she whispered. "All of it, the prayers, the silence, the fear, take it." The seventh bell rang, not from above but inside her chest. Jonah ran forward, fighting the current. "Eliza!" The light burst upward, blinding. For a moment he saw her suspended in it, hair floating, eyes closed, mouth forming silent words. Then the river swallowed everything. He plunged after her, but the force threw him back against the bank. When the glare finally dimmed, the chasm was empty. The water had stopped moving. "Eliza!" he shouted again. Only the echo answered. He searched for hours, wading through mud and debris until night fell. By dawn, the fog had lifted. The river had returned to its old course, calm as if nothing had ever disturbed it. He found her recorder half buried in silt. When he pressed play, static filled the air. Then faintly, "Field note. Closure achieved. Silence holds." He sank to his knees, head in hands. Days later, Jonah returned to Waco. He left the recorder on Father Henley's old desk and drove south, intending never to see the river again. But memory has its own currents. One evening, while refueling in a small town miles from Loretto, he heard bells. Faint at first, then clear. 7 tones, measured, precise. They came not from a church, but from the water tower beyond the fields, the metal ringing on its own. He froze, staring at the reflection of the setting sun in the puddles at his feet. The water rippled once, golden, before settling. When he looked up, a woman stood on the road ahead. Figure slight, coat long, face turned away. For a moment he thought it was Eliza. "Doc?" he called. She didn't move. He walked closer, heart pounding. The wind carried the smell of river mud and myrrh. When he reached where she had stood, there was only a wet footprint, bare, delicate, glowing faintly before fading. Jonah backed away, whispering a prayer he couldn't finish. The wind died. The silence that followed was deep enough to feel. That night, far downstream, fishermen on the Brazos swore they saw a light moving just beneath the surface. Golden, slow, shaped like a woman walking. When they tried to approach, the light sank out of sight, leaving only still water and the echo of a single bell. The Brazos ran quiet again. Spring dissolved into summer, and the fields where Loretto once stood grew over with reeds and pale wildflowers. To travelers on the highway, it looked like nothing more than a low rise of earth beside the water, a forgotten bend in the river. But sometimes, at dusk, the light along that bend turned amber, too warm for sunset, too steady for reflection. Jonah Reeves moved south that June, settling in a town where nobody asked about his limp or his scars. He worked maintenance at the rail yard, lived in a rented room above the diner, and told himself he'd imagined the gold light that followed him down the highway. He stopped drinking coffee. It reminded him of nights on the road, the hum in the ground, the sound of water breathing, yet even in the noise of the trains, he sometimes heard it. 6 low tones, 1 high. He never said her name aloud. A letter arrived in July. No return address. Inside, a page torn from a field notebook, the handwriting precise and familiar. To Jonah Reeves. If you're reading this, it means the river still remembers. Do not be afraid of it. It only holds what we give it. I left something for you where the current slows. E.W. He read it 3 times before folding it carefully back into the envelope. Then he drove north. The road to Loretto had vanished beneath grass. The diocese had fenced off the area, posted signs warning of unstable ground. Jonah parked by the gate and walked the rest of the way. Even before he reached the river, he felt the change in the air. Dense, humming, like the air before thunder. At the bend where the current slowed, the water was perfectly clear. Beneath the surface, something gleamed. He knelt and reached in. His hand closed around metal, a small recorder, the casing dented but intact. He pressed play. For a long moment, nothing. Then Eliza's voice. Calm, steady, professional. Field note, final documentation. The amnion is not a curse. It is remembrance. When we bury the past, it finds another mouth to speak through. I understand that now. If anyone hears this, know that silence is not the absence of truth. It's the shape truth leaves behind. Static filled the rest of the tape. Then one soft breath, and her voice again, barely above a whisper. Listen for the 7th bell. Jonah sat back on the riverbank, recorder resting in his lap. He waited. The first bell came with the wind. Faint, distant, a tone more felt than heard. Then another and another, until 6 notes rippled through the valley. The 7th never came. Only the sound of the river moving around him, unhurried, endless. That night, lightning